Welcome to The Investigators. I'm Vanessa Murphy, joined by my two colleagues here.
Hi, Vanessa. Kyle Paine.
And
David Charns.
And this is bittersweet. We are saying goodbye to investigative journalist David Charns here at KLAS TV.
That smile.
He is moving on. He's taking the next step, which he has wanted. He's done great work here in Las Vegas. Let's take a look at some of his work.
Tonight, he is speaking exclusively with 8 News Now investigator David Charns about how frustrated he is. David.
Henderson police say they got several calls of people being shot at early Thanksgiving morning. It ended here at this 7-Eleven parking lot.
Attorneys for Devin Michaels question how she alone could have beheaded the father of her children.
It's not just small businesses feeling the impact. The people overseeing tourism here on the Las Vegas Strip are projecting a 5% decrease in revenue.
We are outside the town of Searchlight, about an hour from the Las Vegas Valley, and surrounding me are about 100 piles of cremated remains. You are about to see a family's life change in real time. Over the course of 4 minutes on an RTC bus, police say Dominique Lucas's attacker stabbed him 33 times.
The intersection behind me is where Tupac was killed back in September of 1996. He would die 6 days later from his injuries. And we have learned the grand jury met at least 5 times as prosecutors presented their evidence against Wayne Davis.
On the east side near Nellis and Tropicana, I'm David Charns, 8 News Now.
All skinny ones.
All skinny. You look like $1 million. You really do. You look great.
Thank you.
I love that one on the strip.
Oh, with the drone.
Yes,
Yeah, that was about
we love
tariffs.
those.
Very fitting.
You know, it was difficult because I have not only transformed as a journalist here at 8 News Now, but I've transformed physically. And, you know, I've been thinking a lot reflectively the past couple weeks as, you know, announcing that I would be leaving Las Vegas and pursuing a new opportunity. And it's been a transformative time of my life, both professionally and personally, because not only did I find a voice as a investigative journalist, but I found a treadmill. And it has been, you know, quite an experience and quite a privilege to be able to be here and work with the two of you and George and our producer Ian Russell and our 3 investigative photographers. I would never have imagined that I would even be here, nor that I would be moving on.
So take us back to the beginning. You showed up here for an interview in the dead of COVID.
Yes. I was working as a morning anchor in Portland, Maine, and very, very different from this. And when I was there, I kind of was dabbling in what I would call, or what we call in the business, more enterprisey stories, kind of longer form, starting to dig into issues. And then I started doing more investigative work, doing stories on crime and justice. There was one story I did about a convicted murderer who a judge said, he's going to phase out of being violent because he's old. And he served about 20, 25 years in prison and then got out of prison, started stalking this mother and then stabbed her on a sidewalk and killed her in front of her children. And I did that story there in Maine and kind of learned a lot of the tools to do what we do here now every day. I ended up doing many of those stories. And I was the morning anchor there. I kind of got sick of waking up at 2 a.m. and doing that and took a little break during COVID. And then our former news director, Terry Foley, called and said, "Are you interested in this position in Vegas?" And I had never even been here as a 31-year-old. I guess I'm a little bit of a square, but I had never even been to Vegas. And in August 2020, I came out here for my interview in the middle of COVID. It was 110 degrees. We're all wearing masks. And
we saw that first shot, you wearing a mask in the stand-up.
I'm wearing the mask there, and came here, met Vanessa and George and Ian and some of our other managers.
When you got here, it was all plastic?
We were all in the conference room because they didn't even want me because who knows? I was on a plane.
Oh.
And that was it. And then she offered me the job, and then I started in October of 2020.
And 5 years later, here we are. And you're going closer to home. We were both from New England.
Closer there. It's an exciting opportunity and doing the same thing. But there really isn't anything better than being in this market. And I remember in that meeting in August of 2020, Vanessa was talking about some of her stories. George was obviously talking about aliens and that kind of stuff. And I really didn't know what to expect because I hadn't lived here. I didn't know anyone. I didn't really know where to start. And, just kind of looking back at some of those clips, and then when we've talked, obviously not when we're taping something, it's kind of just crazy how, everything kind of worked out. And one thing that always sticks out to me is that I remember in that meeting, I met George, I met Vanessa, and George is kind of an elusive figure, right? He works part-time, he's here in and out. And I remember Terry said, our former news director said, I really hope you learn a lot from George. And I think her plan was kind of for George to kind of mentor. And George was doing a lot of alien stuff and does a lot of projects. And I think not what's ironic, but I really ended up learning the most from Vanessa.
Thank you.
And sitting next to Vanessa is
and
educational.
sitting next to Vanessa for so
Thank
many
you,
years.
guys.
And then you came on.
Yeah, learn nothing from me.
Well, we all kind of.
I'm sure Vanessa has a question for you.
I think we all kind of learned from each other, but I didn't necessarily expect that. And Vanessa and I have been a team, and you and Vanessa and I have been a team. And as I get teary here, it will be sad to leave all that, even though we have our little moments. But
well, we all do
when we're fighting over photographers, yes.
And I appreciate you saying that, and we appreciate your work, both of you. Truly, we have worked as a team. We sort of figured out how to do that, right? We're all competitive, and it really it works when we put these stories together, and you take an aspect, and you take an aspect. We did that with Tupac. David Charns broke the story about the arrest of Dwayne Davis that went international, and we all took an angle. We worked together. It was cohesive, and I appreciate you both.
and we may
let's
have won
take
an
a
Emmy.
break.
Ooh, yes, sorry. Be right back.
Welcome back. We are saying goodbye to David Charns. It's a bittersweet moment. We are, of course, happy to see him take the next step, move closer to family, but we are sad to lose him here, both as a friend and a colleague. One thing I want to get to, David, is your work with DUI, drunk driving, and on the roads here. You really tackled this issue, and behind the scenes, I think what makes a solid investigative journalist is when you tackle an issue and you stay on it, you try to break those stories, you see if there will be change. So what do you want to say about your work with that?
Well, I think a lot of people ask me, and we've had conversations about, and you've seen it because you see it, why I was so interested in that topic. And for me, I just started really seeing a pattern here of people who had DUI convictions, whether it was 1 or 2 or 4 or 5, and then keep doing it. And I really didn't understand why that was continuing to happen. And I would say around 2022 or so, I started doing stories about repeat DUI offenders, people who, yes, had 3, 4, 5 DUIs, and seemingly got a slap on the wrist. Because I always look at driving here, right? Driving is a privilege, and we all get a license, but there are a lot of really bad drivers. And not only do bad drivers kill, but impaired drivers kill. And so I was really interested in that. And then I remember I got a tip in 2022 about a DUI driver who had hit and killed a construction flagger. This person ended up being impaired. And then when we looked into his past, which is why I got the tip, he had served 8 years in prison for hitting and killing someone before while being impaired. And it just didn't make sense to me why he got the first consequence he did, and then I was curious of what the second consequence was going to be. And, as you know, covering some of the topics you cover, and Kyle, you as well, while we report on a lot of numbers and documents and names, every document, every name, every number is usually about a human.
But your coverage
And-
took on a life of its own. It had all
Yeah.
these arms. It was like an
just
octopus almost.
It kind of like turned around, and then it turned into like, okay, well, why do our roads look the way they do? Why is no one doing anything? Why is the law written the way it is, right? And I think, I really pushed and pushed and pushed, and then in the special session from November, the law was finally changed.
which
And-
we take as a huge opportunity to celebrate ourselves when we're able to do that kind
Yeah,
of.
I mean, I don't think anyone said in any meeting, David from KLAS has done a lot of stories, but privately I heard from a lot of people who said you've done a lot of stories that have shown this problem. And, even speaking with Governor Lombardo, who was here last year when we interviewed him, and one of the topics we talked about was DUIs, and he said, you've done a lot of stories and you want to see change. And I was happy that the law, that they increased the possible sentence just a little. And I felt like my work kind of paid off. And it's still happening, but it was something that I did become very passionate about, just because the next victim could have been me, right?
Yeah.
And I make the decision when I know that I'm going somewhere. I ride share and I don't drive. And it's like, it's just so silly to me that people do that.
Another topic I want to cover, public records. So recently there was a meeting to address public records in the state of Nevada. This was the first meeting, a group of different people on what can we do, how can we make access to public records better. There were several journalists in the room. There was public comment. I kind of wanted to wait and see which direction they would go.
Yeah, I didn't.
But David was the first journalist to get up, the first person to get up and say, this is a problem. We need better access. Can you talk about that?
I mean, you guys know, and people watching may not know just how. I wish I could use a word that I can't, but it starts with an F and ends in ED. The public records law is in the state of Nevada, because not only is it written in such a way where it basically gives every agency and every department a leeway to decide what's a public record and what's not. And particularly when we're talking about the things that we're looking for, the word they use is investigative document. And well, what's an investigative document? What's an investigation? When's an investigation over? And a lot of the stuff that we do can't even start until it's possibly too late. And what we deal a lot with in terms of starting to look at stories are things like police records, arrest reports, those kind of documents. And what I quickly found when I came here is every department, every court handles that law differently. And there's no oversight into streamlining that process. And what I told that panel was, if you get arrested in Las Vegas by Metro Police and you go to Las Vegas Justice Court, I'm going to get your record. But if you're lucky, like say you're a very high profile person and you do something terrible down in a rural court and state police arrests you, I may never see that document. And it's kind of like, that's not the way that the state public records laws should be. So I wanted to go from the minute I could say something to say to this panel, look, you have a huge problem. Here's how it affects me and my colleagues' workflow every day. So fix it. And we'll see what they do.
And I think it's not about us.
No.
We are trying to get the records for the public so the public knows what happens. Sometimes they look at us like the pest, but we're doing our jobs for the public. Kyle, did you want to say something?
Well, just that in addition to that aspect of public records, also, I think this is 100% accurate. David changed the way some of the agencies that we deal with handle public records, to the point where David caught the Justice Court trying to...
Other way around. I caught Metro talking in the Justice Court. I feel that, right?
Well, yeah, but I was going to say that you caught the Justice Court listening to Metro, hoping that Metro...
Well, what started to happen is I was filing so many requests for documents, because that really started with a lot of the DUI stuff, because people would get their third DUI, which is a felony, and I would request a lot of reports, and then I started kind of requesting reports because people do a lot of crazy stuff here. and I was finding those, and I kind of created a little niche for myself of some of these crazy crime and justice stories, and that prompted some of these departments to kind of revisit how they were handling these records requests. And what we found in one case, because I had requested a report about a shooting, it was a shooting right in the middle of a neighborhood, and Metro denied releasing it because they cited an ongoing investigation. And I asked the court for the document, which we also can do, and they said the Metro told us not to release it, which is a violation of public records law.
No, and it's also so unacceptable.
But then we caught them, and then they stopped. Or at least we think they stopped. So,
and that's one thing I really want to address. You go through those records pretty much every day. You put in the work. You are one of the hardest workers. I think we can both agree you're one of the hardest workers.
And that's coming from one of the other hardest workers.
Thank you. But seriously, David, that is one thing I want people to know about. People think, well, how did he get that? He puts
he works,
in the work.
Well,
he
it's
keeps
funny.
up with sources. He goes through the records.
I appreciate it. It's funny because people always say, like, you know, when we meet people from other stations, like, we're not like the Jets and the Sharks on West Side Story. I mean, you might think we're like in that Gap commercial, but we we generally do get along. And people always say to me, like, how do you do it? And when do you? I always get, even from people here, when do you sleep? And I promise I sleep. Because
I don't know about that.
My
Kyle.
skin
You don't.
wouldn't
That's
look
not
as
true.
good.
David goes on vacation. We
And
get
still send
emails from
But-
another country.
But this job, and Vanessa, the word you often say is being an investigative reporter is a privilege. This job is a privilege, and people reach out to me when they have something, and if it's 11 at night or on a beach, like I'm gonna respond, and things happen here 24/7, and this isn't a 9-to-5 job. As much as we would sometimes like it to be, it's not. And there are many, many times, you two included, where we are working on weekends. We're working at home. We're sending stuff in. I've come in before for big things, and it's just the nature of the job. And I think when people ask me, well, how did you get that, or how did you do it? My answer is just, I work really hard, and it's just, it's just what it is. What it is.
Are we allowed to bring up a funny story
Sure.
that you might not be happy with?
Go for it.
So when David started, he was putting in the work immediately, and he was using this online system called Pacer, where we get federal court documents. And he was finding cases and printing out and saving the documents because he didn't know that we got charged per page.
Oh, yeah, right.
And the bosses got this really big bill.
Yes.
It has gotten
doesn't think
other
it's
people
so
shut
funny.
off here. Some of the other people didn't know that and got shut off, but you
The
didn't.
credit is she shut it off, but she still gave me access. But she was like, "You're charging like so much money to our account."
But it showed that you were putting in the work and you were doing
what
a
I
ton
said
of
to her?
research.
I said, "We work for a multi-billion-dollar company. I think they can
do.
pay for a couple pages."
We do, but when
Yes.
you trained me, you warned me way ahead of time. Watch
I
out.
think I should. That's probably on me. I probably should have let you know. But on that note, let's take a break. Welcome back to The Investigators. We are saying goodbye to our very own David Charns. He is taking the next step in his career, a bittersweet moment. We're sorry to lose him, but I'm really excited for you, David. So we have to fit these years of working together in this show, and I think there are questions I want to cover. We're going to do it rapid fire. So I have 10 questions here. Give me your answer in like one sentence, which is hard. And David does not know.
No, and
you don't even know them.
No, but he's also not brief. So let's see if we can do this.
All right, let's see. So here we go. Number 1, the interview you wanted to do but didn't get to here.
I would say I wanted to. I would say I wanted to re-interview the governor, which we haven't done. But one that I never ever got to do. That's really hard.
We could go with the governor.
I would say
Yeah.
I mean, we've interviewed him. I've interviewed him several times, but it hasn't been for about a year. I would say the governor again.
And we would appreciate more access and more interviews with Governor Lombardo.
Just an answer to a question.
So, number 2, the interview you've done here that you're most proud of.
The story or the interview?
Interview. Where you feel like maybe you held someone accountable, or it could be a loved one of a story that meant a lot, or the interview you're most proud of. Sorry, it's a tough one.
That's a really, really tough one. I would say the interview that comes to mind is the one I did with Jason Patchett, who's Rex Patchett's father, who was killed in a crash. In that interview, where he was just so passionate about this road defect in Henderson and changing the law, I feel like that interview sticks out to me.
Honorable mention to the Black Widow.
Oh, and Margaret Rudin, yeah.
Who David gave a tour to.
I gave a tour to the building.
And
Yeah,
I
she
looked
was-
up and I was
She's no longer.
impressed
Yes.
to see her. Okay. Number 3, the most difficult agency to deal with in getting public records.
Nevada State Police.
They're ridiculous.
You hear that, Nevada State Police?
It's not. It's. And I will say, I've met the people who do the records, and they're lovely, and they're just understaffed. But there would be records that I would request and get 2 years later, or just the understanding of the law with like what's a record and what's not. Also, the Bureau of Land Management. There was a record request I put in 2023 that I got back a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I've had the same experience with the BLM. I will say Nevada State Police, sometimes it is easy and sometimes it's not. But just to be fair. All right, the most memorable story.
You know, I think the biggest moment of my career here was doing the Tupac, which was getting a text message on a Tuesday, hey, there was a raid last night at this guy's house to reopen the Tupac case, because as you guys know, that was a group project that we all ended up doing, that we did win a Emmy Award for 14 coverage.
I'm going to keep time here. Go to the next question.
And I would say that.
Okay. Number 5, most challenging story.
I mean, some of the DUI stories when we're dealing with people's loved ones are challenging. I would say just continuing to tell the heartbreak of people's lives is emotionally challenging every day in that kind of aspect.
One story we did together was the kids kept in a cage. That was very
terrible.
upsetting. Okay, one tip for a future journalist. One tip.
Stay dedicated and don't get perturbed, and just keep on chugging along. Don't let the haters hate.
Least favorite part about living in Las Vegas.
The summer,
Favorite part.
the winter,
Least favorite part about working in news.
in news.
Yeah.
I would say the climate that we're in, where it's just so politicized that it's just
Fair.
that we're inherently bad. I
fake.
think that's dangerous, and that's what I hate.
Agreed. Favorite thing about working at KLAS.
Besides Vanessa and Kyle and Carlos
Yes.
and Christine, who are sitting in front of me, I would say, we really are a tight newsroom, and I will miss both the camaraderie that we have, because there are many people here who I trust, and I'd also miss, the stories that we cover every day, because Vegas is Vegas, right?
Kyle?
Vegas is Vegas. David, I think, what do we have, 30 seconds?
Yeah.
The reaction in our industry here in Las Vegas is all smiles that you're leaving, except for in this newsroom, because you've been the undefeated, undisputed champion of breaking news here in this city. And on behalf of all of us, and I'll let Vanessa finish, I wish you the
100%.
absolute very best.
We are so happy for you. I'm sad to see you go. We sit across from each other. We're like work husband and wife, you could say. We'll miss you,
Overgrown
but
baby.
Anyway, we appreciate you, David. Any last thing you want to say?
No, I would just, thank you guys and thank everybody at home. And it's been a wild ride, and thanks for entrusting me to tell these stories. And it does not stop just because I'm leaving Las Vegas. And while I know that my next journey will be both challenging and exciting, I know definitely from hearing the feedback from the last couple weeks that I'm welcome back with open arms. So it's closing one door, but that doesn't mean that the door would never reopen again.
Of course, we'd be happy to have
100%.
And thanks for watching.